With the Cleveland Cavaliers being down 0-3 to the New York Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals, I feel like it's definitely time that we start having a conversation catered towards Donovan Mitchell. Now, it's not entirely doom and gloom for Donovan Mitchell because he has made his first conference finals appearance at the age of 29 years old. When being down this significantly to just a superior team in the New York Knicks, it really puts into question what Donovan Mitchell's future potentially looks like in the NBA. Because for a player this talented, his future feels strangely unclear. Let's get into it. Now, I think we should first start off Donovan Mitchell in Utah. As rookie, came onto the stage as a really impactful guy for the Utah Jazz. In his rookie season, he averaged 21 points per game, 4 assists, and 4 rebounds. On 44% shooting, 34% from 3, and 81% from the line. The Utah Jazz made the playoffs and actually made it to the second round with a first-round upset against an OKC team that had Russell Westbrook coming off an MVP year, Paul George, which was essentially one of the best two-way forwards in the league at the time, and Carmelo Anthony, which in his own respect was still a star-caliber player. And with his solid success in Utah in the playoffs over the years, what really put him on the map was his playoff performance in the bubble in 2020. To this day, still one of the most impressive playoff performances that we've ever seen, Mitchell averaged 36 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists against the Denver Nuggets, which he would go on to lose in 7 games. But so far, what Donovan Mitchell has demonstrated throughout the regular season and the playoffs is his ability to carry the offense for whatever team he's on. And if you put his career into a retrospective, Donovan Mitchell has already had a kind of a career most NBA players could only dream of. But despite the greatness that Donovan Mitchell has displayed throughout his career, greatness is measured very differently based on the context and the different type of player throughout NBA history. Look at the landscape of the NBA today. The NBA feels less forgiving than ever. And as a superstar player as Donovan Mitchell, he's kind of not the norm for the league. He's a 6'2", undersized shooting guard that's a high-volume scorer. And throughout NBA history, the only high-volume scoring guards that were undersized that's had success in the league so far is Isaiah Thomas back in the 1980s and Stephen Curry. But the pattern that's followed Donovan Mitchell throughout his career is that he might be too good to fail, but not dominant enough to fully break through as a championship number one. Let's take this conversation to the Cavs playoffs this year. When we look at the Cleveland Cavaliers as a whole in the playoffs in general, we actually start to question if they're good enough for a championship caliber team. I first want to talk about the Cavs' playoff execution, because in the prior 2 rounds, they went 7 games to what some people would consider very inferior teams compared to the roster and the construction that Cleveland had. Another thing they struggle with is offensive limitations, specifically with Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley, despite being the 3rd best player on the Cavs, is one of the most offensively limiting players in the league. When Donovan Mitchell doesn't have his game going, when James Harden doesn't have his game going, and the Cavs just need someone to rely on the offensive end. Evan Mobley can provide that for them, but he necessarily doesn't. And that's not to say Cleveland's losing isn't automatically an indictment on Donovan Mitchell. But after enough years, enough playoff exits, and now potentially another collapse, eventually the uncomfortable questions start showing up. How high is the ceiling for this roster? Now, you would think they would be a championship caliber team, but when I generally look at the personnel that the Cavaliers have, I don't even know if they believe that they're a championship caliber team themselves. But let's bring the topic back to the main plot of this video. Where does Donovan Mitchell's career go from here? Because does Donovan Mitchell actually need to be the number 1 option for a team? Would his best basketball potentially be beside someone that's better than him? Would he even accept that role? Because at 29 years old, do we see Donovan Mitchell ever winning a championship? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But the more interesting question might be, when his career is over, what will Donovan Mitchell exactly represent? He's an elite scorer. He changes your franchise to some extent. He's one of the best playoff stars we've ever seen. Despite all that, Would he even rank top 10 all time in shooting guard positions? You'd look at the stats of Donovan Mitchell and think he's one of the best shooting guards of all time. But when you look at his career as a retrospective, what has he actually accomplished up until this point other than all-star selections and a couple all-NBA selections and some really good regular seasons? My personal belief, I believe Donovan Mitchell might be the face of a new NBA category. And I would label it as players that are too good to ignore but impossible to neatly define. Players that are good enough and they've competed enough and they've had some playoff success, but they never were really meant to get over the top due to the parity and how good the rest of the league is compared to their greatness. But all that just culminates into Donovan Mitchell's career as a summary so far. He's one of the best scorers in his era and is borderline a top 15 shooting guard at the position already. But when we take into account his playoff success and the collapses of his team, which is simply just due to either bad roster construction or just plain out bad production from the rest of his teammates, how would that influence how we view Donovan Mitchell once it's all said and done? But that's going to be all for the video. You guys can let me know down below in the comments what you think about Donovan Mitchell's playoff performance this year, where the Cavs went wrong, or where you see him going from here, honestly, because, I mean, if this Cleveland team can't get it done and win a championship, I honestly don't know where you go from here. Would you trade Donovan Mitchell? Would you trade James Harden? Would you just run it back and hope for the best? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and I'll catch y'all next time.